Hello everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Aki, a tax accountant. Today, we'll discuss the basics and the calculations. Example of home expense allocation for those who use their home as an office, especially those working alone. Home expense allocation can be tricky and often scrutinized in tax audits. Therefore, it's essential to understand how to calculate it correctly. Without further ado, let's get started. Okay, we'll begin by understanding the basics of home expense allocation. It's a legal concept applied to those who declare business income. Let's first look at the legal picture of home expense allocation. For instance, in the case of business income, the necessary expenses that can be entered depends on the home expense allocation rate. Considering the example utilities like gas or electricity, if you are using your home as an office, you will be using electricity for your work, such as your computer, and for your daily living. If you pay 5,000 Japanese yen per month for electricity, the question arises, how much of this is business expense and how much is not? It is calculated based on home expense allocation rate. The primary legal principle here is that the central portion that is necessary for execution of business becomes a home expense allocation. It is a bit confusing, but if it's an expense required for business, it becomes necessary. What kind of amount is accepted? Firstly, irrespective of the category like blue or white return, if more than 50% or equal is used for business, it is depend on necessary expense according to the law. Hence, even if there is a mindset to include all costs from a legal perspective, the fundamental rule is must be or equal than 50% usage. However, there is an exception here. During the final tax return, even if usage is less than 50%, say 10% or 20%, there are cases where it includes a necessary expense. It is allowed under the law, especially for those who declare a blue return, even if the part involved in necessary costs is less than 50%. It is clearly written in the account books and the calculation content are also written correctly. It is recognized as a necessary expense. But what about those who declare a white return? For them too, it is possible to include necessary expense even if they are less than 50%. It is not legally stipulated, but it is determined by a rule within the National Tax Agency. Hence, the requirement is usually to involve it. If it can be proven that the necessary part is prominent, it can be included as an essential expense. It is a tax office perspective. However, you must be able to demonstrate and prove it. With proof, it becomes easier to acknowledge it as a necessary expense, especially when it comes to such essential costs. If the allocation rate changes slightly, it costs lead to a significant difference in total cost. It, in return, reduces the income and consequently the tax. In essence, it becomes a method to conceal income and lower taxes. The tax office is aware of this, so they closely examine whether calculations are accurate. Therefore, conducting accurate calculation and being confident about the expense is essential. For instance, rent is often a part of allocation calculations. For those who live and work in the same place, only the portion of the house used for work can be considered a business expense. Now, let's talk about rent as a necessary expense. How does this work? For instance, if you have a space you are using an office, the amount of rent allocation as office expense depends on the total size of your office occupies. Let's take, for example, you have a 8.2 square meter workspace and 50 square meter property. It makes up about 16.4% of the total area. If you rent 100,000 yen, 16,400 yen can be considered office expense. Calculating how much space you use for work easily on is essential. It allows you to adjust it in your monthly booking. If tax audit occur, you have the necessary documents such as floor plan to show the proportion of your office space. Next, let's consider electricity expense. There are various ways to calculate this, but for simplicity, let's take a basic example. You work at home and about 8 hours a day for 21 days a month. In the 30 days months, considering about 8 hours for sleeping, we have 16 working hours. With this, you can calculate that work takes up about 35% of your total activity time. Of course, there could be other way to calculate this. Some might consider that you work 8 hours and sleep 8 hours, so your activity for 16 hours. Thus, work takes up 50% of that time. While this might seem reasonable, it might not stand to scrutiny during a tax audit. Remember that everyone needs time for rest and other non-work activities. Now, let's think about water and the gas bills. Are they necessary if you are doing administrative work from home? You might think, oh, I need water to make tea or to wash my hands more often because I'm home. Still, the question here is, do these expenses increase specifically because of your work? Or would they be the same even if you just stay home without working? For example, if you are a chef, the cost of water and the gas used in cooking and the research can be considered a business expense. But for someone doing administrative work, it could be clearly cut. You might argue that you must use water because you're home working, but would not you also use water at home even if you were not working? In light of this, it can be challenging to justify these necessary expense for your work. That said, do your water and the gas expense increase specifically because of your work, or would they be same even if you stayed home without working? When you are told to include utilities such as water bills in your costs, many people find it difficult to say yes. Water bills are not really justifiable as a business expense, so it's a point of consideration in the appointment. Please align this with the nature of your business and provide a reasonable justification. For instance, it might hard to include, so we'll proceed without having it in the appointment. Next, what about gas bills? They are similar to water bills, aren't they? You might want a drink when you're in the office and have my coffee too. You boil water when you are in the office and enjoy drink. That is a common situation. However, when individual works from home, if the gas bill increases because they are home and working, or even if they are relaxing at the home watching a video, can you compare these situations? Don't you drink coffee when you watch your movie at home too? Can you differentiate between the increase in gas usage when you are working from home and when you're simply at home? Many of you might agree if someone asked you if there was such difference. Those who think this way might conclude that including this into business expensive difficult. It's just an example, so depends on your business and its nature. There might be situation you could consist of it. If so, I recommend you to provide a solid justification. In this example, I consider those working from their own homes, so please bear that in mind. Next, let's consider gasoline cost for your car. It's common to apportion this based on mileage. You drove 20 kilometers in a month and the total distance was 100 kilometers. You could include 20% of gasoline cost. It is one way to calculate. Alternatively, if you drive regularly every day, you might not need to base it on distance. In that case, consider apportioning based on days. For example, if you drive 5 days a week, it might be possible to apportion based on the number of days. It would depend on the nature of your job. Discuss this in detail with your accountant, and if you have any doubts, I recommend you consult them. So today, we discussed the basics of home expense apportionment and gave some examples. Many small business owners might find this information helpful as the number of people working from home increases. Thank you for watching until the end. See you in the following video. Bye bye.